Fluorescent lights buzzed quietly in the base security office. Lieutenant Graves sat behind the desk, scrolling idly through a report he clearly wasn't reading. The other two guards leaned over a phone, laughing at a video. Flores, shake, an old man in uniform, face red from the cold, forced into push-ups on frozen concrete while soldiers watched and joked off camera. Still can't believe that guy thought he was someone, one muttered, grinning. Graves didn't even look up. Said he trained half of command. Kept asking for someone named Lee. I told him we don't have that name on file. He chuckled. Poor bastard really thought someone was going to come out for him. No one in the room looked uncomfortable. No one asked a question. The laughter continued. But rewind 1 hour. Out in the snow, the man kneeling wasn't shaking from fear. His breathing was steady. His eyes calm. Calculating. Watching the guards. Watching the camera filming him. He didn't say a word, but his face said it clearly. You just made a mistake you can't take back. They thought he was just another nobody. What they didn't know, he wrote the rules they just broke. You ever seen something like this happen in real life? Someone dismissed like they were nothing? Worse. Have you ever been that person? Tell me where you're reading from. Drop a comment. Because this story doesn't end the way they thought it would. Arthur Miles woke before the alarm, though he still said it out of habit. 5 a.m. sharp, not 5:01, not 4:59. His body knew when 30 years of U.S. Army discipline had trained every cell in him to operate on time, without protest. Even in retirement, the reflexes stayed. That's what no one tells you about aging after duty. The habits don't dissolve. They calcify. He sat up with a slow, mechanical precision, not because he was fragile, but because he moved with intent. Nothing was wasted, not energy, not motion, not thought. The room was spare, almost ascetic. 4 walls, 2 chairs, 1 small table. Everything in its place. A single bookshelf stacked with military history, folded newspapers, and old field manuals with curled corners. No plants, no knickknacks, no distractions. On the nightstand, a digital clock, a black notebook, and a dull brass medallion. The kind they give at retirement ceremonies, etched with rank and years served. He didn't polish it. He didn't frame it. He just kept it near like a receipt. Arthur stood, joints creaking softly. He didn't wince. Pain was routine, familiar. He ran his hand over his short, silver hair, then glanced out the small square window. Snow, thin at first, but steady. The kind that makes everything quiet, slows the world. He liked that kind of weather. Less movement, more clarity. He made coffee, black, 2 scoops, no sugar. The same every morning. Poured it into an old metal mug from deployment. Still had his initials, AM, scratched beneath the handle. One side of the mug was dented. A reminder. The kind of thing civilians would toss, but soldiers keep. He sat at the table, opened the notebook, and added a date. No entry. Just the date. He did that every morning. Not to write, but to record his presence. Proof he was still here. Still watching. Still himself. Next to the notebook was a photo, laminated now from age. Arthur, in full dress uniform, flanked by a group of young recruits. Some smiling, some stone-faced. Dead center. A young black woman in officer stripes, just barely visible, eyes sharp. Catherine Lee. She'd made general last year. She had called him 6 weeks ago, short, clipped, efficient, like always. I'm back at Coldridge for Q1 rotation, she said. If you're ever nearby, I'd be honored. Arthur didn't do honors, but he owed her something. She'd held the line when it cracked. That mattered. He opened the small drawer beneath the table. Inside, a box about the size of a folded flag. Mahogany. Brass hinges. He ran a thumb along the top, then opened it. Inside, a letter folded. A set of 3 medals. One of them bronze, one unmarked, and a USB drive. He added one more item. A patch frayed at the edges, embroidered with the Coldridge insignia and a date stitched in red, 1993. He closed the box, wrapped it in plain gray cloth, and slipped it into his canvas satchel. He didn't zip it shut. No need. He wouldn't be running. Arthur dressed in layers. Undershirt, old army sweater, wool-lined coat, military issue, still held its shape. Over it, the same field jacket he'd worn to briefings in Baghdad, Fallujah, Stuttgart. The patches had been removed, but the weight was still there. He stepped outside, and the cold met him like a test. Brutal but honest. No deceit in winter, only truth. The bus stop was empty. A single flake landed on the back of his hand. He watched it melt. No rush. The bus arrived late. It always did. The driver, young and distracted, didn't glance twice at Arthur as he boarded. No nod. No good morning. He took a seat in the back. A mother and child sat 2 rows ahead. The child peeked at him, curious about the uniform. Arthur gave a small, respectful nod. The child turned away shyly. Across the aisle, 2 teenagers laughed at something on their phone. One of them gestured toward Arthur and mimicked marching. He didn't flinch. Let them talk. At the Coldridge entrance, the air changed. The fences were taller than he remembered. The guard tower was automated now. Cameras everywhere. The young soldier in the booth didn't open the gate, just gestured for Arthur to step aside. Arthur did, calmly, hands visible. No sudden movements. His breath fogged the air. ID, the soldier said, not looking up. Arthur handed over his worn military card. Laminated, stamped, retired. The photo was 20 years younger. The soldier squinted. This expired. Arthur said nothing. You got a visitor's pass? No. Scheduled appointment? No. The soldier looked annoyed now. So what are you doing here? I was told I could drop something off. By who? General Lee. That name made the soldier pause. Not out of recognition. Just protocol. He tapped at a screen inside the booth. Not seeing anything. No delivery scheduled. I'm not delivering, Arthur replied, voice calm. Just visiting. That's not how this works. Arthur nodded once, said nothing more. The soldier tapped again, mumbled into his mic, called for backup. Another soldier appeared, even younger, trying to look tough, gloves too big for his hands. He stared Arthur down like he expected a threat. Arthur waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The wind picked up. The snow thickened. Arthur's boots began to sink slightly. A 3rd soldier arrived. This one carried rank. A lieutenant. Mid-30s, sharp uniform, practiced authority. His name tag read Graves. You the guy causing problems? Graves asked. Arthur blinked. No problems. You're on base without clearance. In uniform, uninvited. This is an active duty attire. You look like you're trying to pass as one of us. Arthur said nothing. You need to leave, Graves continued. Now, Arthur stayed still. I'll go when I've left this package with someone authorized. That's not how this works, sir. Graves stepped forward. You can't loiter here in military attire, claiming access you don't have. He motioned to the soldiers. Take his coat. Run it for tags. Arthur's face didn't change, but something in his eyes did. He reached into his satchel slowly and removed the gray-wrapped box. He held it in front of him. No weapons, he said plainly. Graves rolled his eyes. You think this is your movie moment? He pointed to the ground. Down. Now. Push-ups, or we detain. The younger soldiers hesitated. Sir, one murmured, he's older. I said down. Arthur didn't resist. He lowered himself, gloves off, hands to the ground. The cold bit instantly. He began. 1, 2, 3. The snow thickened. No one stopped him. Behind him, a phone camera turned on. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He didn't break. He counted each push-up in his head, not out loud. He knew how to breathe, how to survive shame without letting it rot you. The sky above was gray. The wind howled. And in his chest, beneath the fabric, beneath the silence, something steady burned. He saw them watching. He remembered their faces. And in his mind, he started taking notes. Names, voices, numbers. Not for revenge. For the record. He had survived worse. He had outlived generals. And he wasn't here for their permission. He was here for the truth. 2 days passed. Arthur didn't tell anyone about what happened at the gate. He didn't need to. He had the names, the faces. The footage would surface eventually. Someone always leaked something. But he wasn't betting on exposure. He was betting on the system collapsing under its own weight. If you press the right points. He'd seen it before. In foreign governments. In military tribunals. In review boards that said just a formality. right before someone's pension disappeared. He didn't plan to scream. He planned to be precise. It began with an email, a simple message to the administrative wing of Coldridge Base, requesting formal access to submit a grievance and to deliver official items related to former military instruction protocol. That was his phrasing. Careful, legal, non-threatening. He got a reply 20 minutes later. We are unable to locate your profile in the current system. Please submit DD-214 documentation and re-verify all credentials through e-access portal. Arthur knew what that meant. He followed the link. The e-access portal was built on a system he'd helped draft security specs for in 2009. A hybrid verification interface combining biometric entry, military credential scanning, and document cross-checking with VA records. He remembered when they rolled it out. Now it told him. Crossmark, no match found. User ID not recognized. Contact support. He tried again. He uploaded his documents. Tried an alternate ID. Tried his service number. Each time, the screen blinked and told him, system does not reflect active or retired service history. Which was strange, because his records had been submitted to the Library of Military Service in 2015 and recertified in 2018. He'd received his last notice of honorable status less than 4 months ago. He opened his files, cross-checked everything. Nothing wrong, except the system didn't recognize him. That's not a glitch. That's a gate. He picked up the phone, called the base number listed on the website. A receptionist answered, young nasal voice, distracted typing in the background. Coldridge Ops, how may I assist? This is Colonel Arthur Miles. I'm trying to verify access for a document handoff. My ID isn't registering in the portal. Pause. What department? Instructional legacy. Hold please. Click. Music. He waited 7 minutes. A man picked up. Different voice. Older but tense. Can I help you? Arthur repeated himself. The man sighed audibly. Sir, the system doesn't have you on file. There's really nothing we can do on our end. That's not accurate. It's just how it's routed now. Then route it higher. Silence. Then, sir, respectfully, I need to ask you to file a FOIA request if you believe your status has been lost. Lost? Yes. The database migrated last year. We've had glitches. Some older records didn't carry. Arthur leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed. He could hear the life forming in real time. You're telling me an entire base can't verify a colonel service record? Sir, again, I don't make those calls. Who does? More silence. Then a redirect. A new email. A new form. Arthur wrote it down. Thanked the man. Hung up. He submitted the FOIA request within the hour. He knew it would take 6 to 8 weeks. They were counting on that. The system didn't erase him all at once. It just pushed him into waiting loops. Dead ends. Try again, later walls. He opened a second email account. Submitted the same document again, under a new name variation. Miles, Rhett, just to see if it yielded a different result. It did. Crossmark incomplete file. Verification denied. He took a screenshot. He started a folder. Coldridge paper trail. Each response. Each denial. Each shift in wording. All time-stamped. Then it got weirder. He called the VA regional office to confirm his last benefits update. The woman on the line was polite, a little rushed, but helpful. I've got you as confirmed, she said. You're still enrolled in Priority Group 1. Can you see when my last credential ping came from Coldridge? Pause. Typing. It looks like they ran your file last week, but that's odd. What? There's a note. No longer affiliated. Access revoked per base directive 402. Arthur's face went still. Can you read that directive? I don't think I can, sir. It's internal only. Who filed it? Another pause. Longer this time. It just says officer record, L. Graves. Lieutenant Graves. The same smug bastard from the gate. The kid who thought a man in a retired uniform was playing dress-up. He had filed something, quietly, to mark Arthur as no longer valid, which meant he had access and influence, enough to start wiping names. Arthur didn't panic. He printed every email, saved every voice memo. He opened his old tablet, pulled up the backup archive he hadn't touched in 5 years. Inside, scanned documents, mission logs, deployment summaries, award citations. He started comparing them. The language in the denial emails didn't match Coldridge protocol. The formatting was off. The auto-generated IDs were 1 digit short. They weren't real errors. They were deliberate filters. Someone was using the system, not to erase him from the world, but to erase him from the record. That night, Arthur took a walk. Snow was falling again. He liked the way it silenced the city, how it muffled judgment, made everything equal. He passed by a library window and saw the glow of a security guard hunched over a desk. A flicker of recognition passed through him. Not the man, but the posture. The quiet of someone invisible in their own workplace. He kept walking, past a diner, past a pharmacy. He stopped at a mailbox and dropped in a package. The original photo of him with Catherine Lee and a single folded page. It was addressed to a former aide who now worked in the Pentagon. Not an ask for help, just a reminder. I still exist. The next morning, Arthur received an email from a private server. No signature, no greeting, just an attachment. A PDF of an internal Coldridge memo labeled PRE-approved access list. Q1 general rotation. He opened it. Catherine Lee's name was listed. So was Graves, but someone had crossed out Arthur's in red. Handwritten, scanned, deliberate. He printed it, added it to the folder, labeled the page. Erasure confirmed. He wasn't just being blocked anymore. He was being deleted. With full awareness, inside a system he helped build. A system designed for integrity, being bent by people who hadn't earned it. And now, they had his full attention. They didn't expect him to return. Not after what happened at the gate. Not after the email denials. Not after the file that labeled him unverified. But Arthur came back, not with shouting, not with threats, just with presence. He wore the same coat, same boots, carried the same satchel. Though this time, there was no package inside. Just documents, proof, names, copies of directives, snapshots of errors they thought were invisible. This time, he walked through the front admin building, not the checkpoint, not the security gate, the front, like a man with nothing to hide and nothing left to lose. A few soldiers saw him and stiffened, not in respect, but discomfort. Recognition does that when it comes late. At the reception desk, a civilian clerk, maybe early 30s, red nails, stiff ponytail, blinked when she saw his ID. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, rehearsed. "You're not listed on the active ledger." Arthur didn't look surprised. He simply handed her a printed copy of the Coldridge memo, the one where his name had been crossed out by hand. She read it once, then again. Her lips tightened. "I'll need to speak to a supervisor," she said. "I'll wait," Arthur replied. He didn't sit. He stood, still, like a statue no one had ordered, but couldn't ignore. 15 minutes passed. Finally, a door opened. Lieutenant Graves stepped out. Same smug face, same clip stride, but something in his eyes shifted when he saw Arthur. Not fear, not guilt, just irritation. "Colonel," Graves said with the kind of politeness that only exists to disarm lawsuits. "Lieutenant," Arthur answered evenly. "You've returned. You crossed a line." Graves smiled, too sharp, too casual. "Sir, if you feel our process failed you, we have formal channels. You alter my file. We updated our access database. Anyone without current federal clearance was removed. You wouldn't believe how many outdated names we found." Arthur held up a printed screenshot, the denial message with a faulty error code. Graves' voice caught mid-word. "I helped build this system," Arthur said. "That code doesn't exist. Not in the test framework. Not in the live deployment." Graves tried to speak. Arthur cut him off. "I trained half the officers in this building. I wrote the behavioral compliance policy. I reviewed the early access control layers in 2011. Graves stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And yet here you are, with no clearance, no appointment, standing in a lobby." Arthur stared at him, then said flatly, "You wouldn't want to walk that back." The words didn't come out angry. They came out quiet, heavy, precise. Everyone in the room felt it. Even the clerk behind the desk, who suddenly stopped typing. Graves laughed, but it was forced now. "You're trying to scare me with legacy? You think a folder of old documents is power?" Arthur didn't blink. "You're not scared yet," he said. Then what are you doing here? Graves snapped. Looking for stage? A reunion? Arthur reached into his bag, pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside, a copy of the directive Graves had filed. With the second page, an email chain between Graves and another officer, joking about ghosting the dinosaur who thinks he still matters. Arthur placed it on the front desk. Consider this your warning, he said. Graves leaned over the desk, eyes narrowing. You're a ghost, Miles. You're not in the system. You don't exist anymore. Arthur nodded once. I'm counting on that. That night, someone tried to break into Arthur's online file storage. He got a ping at 1:14 a.m., unauthorized login attempt from a military IP address, flagged and blocked. By 2:03 a.m., the email address he'd used to submit the original FOIA request was deleted, completely wiped. By 7:40 a.m., the backup files were being rate limited. Someone had reported them for misuse of federal likeness. Arthur smiled. The faster they came, the more reckless they got, which meant the trail got louder. He pulled out a flash drive and started duplicating everything. Uploaded the files to 5 encrypted vaults across 3 cloud providers. Sent one to a contact in D.C., a former journalist turned ethics compliance officer. Then he went analog, printed everything. By noon, he returned to Coldridge again, this time to the records building. Inside was a marble hallway, echoes in every footstep, the kind of building meant to intimidate, not welcome. At the front desk, he gave his name. The receptionist scanned her screen, frowned. I'm sorry. There's a note here. You're flagged as non-verified. Arthur didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a laminated training certificate, signed by the base commander from 2002. Her signature, Catherine Lee. The receptionist looked up. I'll check with someone. 10 minutes later, Arthur was walking down a back hallway with a junior officer in khakis. The man kept glancing sideways at Arthur, nervous, unsure why this older man moved like he owned the building. Sir, I'm really not supposed to let non-cleared personnel. You're not, Arthur said. You're escorting a former field instructor with senior base contribution status to correct a system failure. Quietly, the man opened the records room. Arthur stepped inside. Rows and rows of file cabinets, digital terminals humming. He walked to the center console and entered a search string. Miles Arthur. Call retired. Access. Full instructional plus field record. Range. 1992 to 2015. Result. No record found. Arthur took a breath, then opened his folder and placed it next to the screen. Side by side, the denial message, the original inclusion memo, his badge log from 2012. He looked at the officer. This is what erasure looks like. The man swallowed. Sir, I don't know what to do. Arthur nodded. You're not supposed to. He picked up the folder and left. Back home. He sat in the dark for a long time, not in defeat, in clarity. They'd done more than erase his name. They'd mocked his years. They'd joked about his age. They called him the wrong name, dinosaur, ghost, background noise. And none of it was an accident. The worst part? No one had to order it. It happened because no one stopped it. That's what systems do best. They erase without having to kill. That night, Arthur received a call. Blocked number. He answered. A woman's voice. Familiar. Arthur. He paused. Catherine. I heard what happened. He waited. I'm sorry, she said. No, he replied. You're not. She exhaled. Not guilty. Just tired. They're scared, she said. You're a problem now. I've been quiet for years. Exactly. He didn't ask her to fix it. She didn't offer. Some silences hold more weight than apology. Before hanging up, she said, be careful. He responded. I stopped being careful the moment he made me drop. Click. Arthur got dressed. Same boots, same coat, same fire in his chest. He wasn't going to crash the system. He was going to force it to see itself. No threats, no shouting, just evidence. Relentless, undeniable. They crossed the line when they erased him with a laugh. Now he would show the world where all the bodies were buried, and the paper trail they forgot to burn. They didn't expect to see him inside. They'd done everything to keep him out. System blocks, flagged accounts, paper trails that led nowhere, a whisper campaign that turned his name into a shrug. Wasn't he retired? Didn't he get phased out? He was supposed to vanish. Instead, Arthur Miles walked through the front door of Coldridge Base's training directorate, not with a badge, but with authority. He didn't announce himself. He didn't ask for permission. He wore a dark civilian coat, neatly ironed shirt, no rank displayed. But when he passed the junior officers in the corridor, some of them instinctively stepped aside. That kind of posture doesn't fade. That kind of gaze doesn't belong to someone unsure. It belonged to someone who knew what this place used to be and what it had turned into. The office had changed. The plaques were new. The furniture was sleeker. There were more screens, fewer people. The old wall of honor, portraits of past instructors, was gone, replaced with a digital slideshow of motivational quotes. Arthur noticed. He always noticed. He climbed the stairs slowly, but not out of weakness, out of calculation. At the top floor was the Operations Archive, a department technically not open to retirees. But Arthur wasn't here as a guest. He was here to trigger something no one had accounted for: legacy leverage. When a young man at the desk saw Arthur, he frowned. "This section is restricted, sir." Arthur handed over a folder. Inside, a certified copy of the Military Instructional Contributor Protocol, an obscure but active policy that granted high-level former instructors access to archived data they had directly helped design or implement. The clause was his. He wrote it in 2006. The kid scanned it, blinked, stammered, I've never seen this pull before." Arthur nodded. "That's the problem." The man buzzed him through. The room was colder than he remembered. The lights hummed low. Shelves lined the walls, not books, but hard drives, network switches, server logs. A single digital terminal in the middle glowed blue. Arthur sat down. He entered a passphrase. The screen blinked. Access granted. The entire digital skeleton of Coldridge Base lay before him. Personnel changes, incident reports, internal memos, project logs. He didn't look for his name. He looked for what replaced him. Graves. His name popped up 42 times in the last quarter. Review panels. Internal approvals. A suspicious amount of clearance he hadn't earned based on rank alone. And more disturbing, references to a program called Vantage, a behavior tracking algorithm designed to predict internal risks within command structures. Originally built as a training aid, quietly repurposed as a surveillance tool against whistleblowers, dissenters, and legacy holdovers. Arthur's name had been entered into the system manually 3 months ago, flagged as a low-visibility disruptor. His entire record had been marked incompatible with modern operations culture, buried, but not deleted, just mislabeled. That's the crack in the wall. He printed it. He was walking down the corridor when someone stopped him. A young black woman in uniform. Second Lieutenant Bars. "Excuse me, sir," she said. Arthur turned. "I think I've seen you before." He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Were you one of the original instructors for Fire Team Delta?" "Yes." She straightened. Eyes sharpened. "My aunt was in that class. Said you saved her life. Not in combat, just gave her a way to survive the system." Arthur gave a small nod. Then he handed her one of the printed pages. No explanation. Just put that somewhere safe. She took it like it was sacred. Arthur left the building. No one stopped him. No one knew yet what he had just done. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't exposed. He had simply walked into a system that forgot him and reminded it who built the foundation. That night, Graves got a call. The voice on the other end was calm, clipped. "Why is a flagged instructor accessing Vantage logs?" Graves stuttered, tried to blame IT, tried to downplay. But the system doesn't lie to itself forever. Not when the logs show who made the edits. Not when the access trail leads straight to him. Not when a retired colonel used a clause he himself authored to open the exact door they swore was locked. The next morning, Arthur received a message. No signature. No subject line. Just 3 words. "You were right." Attached. An internal memo from Graves to Base Command. The timestamp was from the day after their confrontation. The subject line read, "Miles Protocol. Immediate suppression requested. The body was worse. His presence is a reputational hazard. I recommend permanent credential nullification and informal discrediting measures." Arthur read it once, then printed it, then wrote one word across the top in red pen. Pattern. He didn't plan to fight Graves directly. That would have been too easy. Instead, he mapped the structure. Who approved the memo? Who authorized the file erasures? Who ignored the complaints when his ID stopped working? One by one, he plotted the chain of complicity. He wasn't just going to expose a man. He was going to expose a culture. And it started with a folder. Inside that folder now lived a signed access clause from 2006, a manipulated personnel memo from 2023, a surveillance log entry marking him as a risk, a suppression request, and the original training certificate bearing his name in block print. Next to the base commander's signature, Catherine Lee. Each page was heavy, each one a crack. Together, they were a fault line. 2 days later, Arthur walked into a quiet meeting room. This time he was invited. The email had been vague. Please join us for a review of instructional legacy documentation. No one mentioned his complaint. No one mentioned Graves. But he recognized the faces at the table. 2 JAG officers. 1 VA rep. A silent civilian in a gray suit. Internal oversight. The air was stiff. Arthur didn't flinch. He placed the folder on the table. Slid it forward. No speech. No accusations. Just, these are your records. I'm just here to return them. No one spoke for a long moment. Then the civilian picked up the first page. Read the title. Eyes narrowed. Arthur leaned back in his chair. He'd walked through the door they thought was sealed. And now the lock was on their side. Graves didn't see it coming. He thought the meeting was routine, a quarterly debrief for security revisions and digital compliance. It was held in conference room Delta 2, the one with the beige chairs and the flickering overhead light no one ever fixed. The same dull space they used to bury awkward reports and pretend they didn't need to change anything. He arrived 5 minutes late, didn't apologize, just nodded at the room, set down his notepad, and reached for a carafe of stale coffee. Then he saw Arthur Miles, seated at the far end of the table. Posture straight, hands folded, a plain manila folder in front of him, thick with printed pages. Graves froze, mug halfway to his lips. Someone cleared their throat. One of the JAG officers, younger but serious. A quiet type who looked like she kept her resume on standby in case things ever got corrupt enough to walk. We're here to address a personnel irregularity, she said. Graves didn't move. What's he doing here? Arthur didn't answer. He simply opened the folder and pulled out a page. It was the memo, the one Graves had filed, calling Arthur a reputational hazard. He slid it across the table, face up. Graves didn't touch it. The civilian from oversight, gray suit, no name tag, tapped a pen twice on the table. This document was submitted under your login, he said. Graves adjusted in his chair. We flag people all the time for outdated credentials. The oversight officer raised a hand. That's not what this says. Another document appeared. A printout of the behavior flag algorithm. Vantage. Highlighted. A manual override Graves had performed to reclassify Arthur's ID as malicious origin. Then another. An email thread between Graves and another officer, mocking the old dog with a hero complex. Graves looked at Arthur now. You've been digging. Arthur replied, come. You've been hiding. The air in the room changed. People shifted in their seats. Graves leaned forward, tried to pivot. Colonel Miles and I had a misunderstanding. There was confusion at the gate. You mean the push-ups? Said the JAG officer. Her voice was low but sharp. Excuse me. You made him drop in the snow. For 3 hours. Graves flinched. He wasn't cleared. He was delivering an instructional package to a base commander who trained under him, she said. Graves turned to the oversight officer. We don't discipline gate procedures based on feelings. Arthur didn't raise his voice. He reached into the folder and pulled out a still image, a frame from the security video. It showed Arthur in the snow, coat off, breath fogging, 3 soldiers standing over him, one of them grinning. Graves said nothing. Arthur placed a second photo. Same moment, different angle. Someone had filmed it from inside the base. A phone pressed against glass. The caption had been part of a group text. It read, let the old man freeze. Maybe he'll melt into the pavement. Arthur didn't look angry. He looked finished. The kind of finished that says, I have nothing left to prove, only truth to deliver. Graves tried a different route. You're trying to ruin my career over a misunderstanding. Arthur looked at him. Did you ever ask who I was? Graves stared. I knew who you were. That's why we couldn't let you near certain files. That slip hit the room like a dropped knife. The JAG officer raised her head slowly. Repeat that. Graves knew he'd gone too far. He tried to backpedal. I meant, he wasn't cleared for modern access. But you never requested a block through protocol, the civilian said. Because I didn't have to. Actually, the JAG officer said, opening her own folder. You did? She turned the page toward him. Base Directive 412. Clearance Revocation Policy. Arthur's name had been added. But there was no signature, no approval trail, no oversight sign-off. Just Graves, acting alone. Graves dropped the coffee mug. It shattered. He didn't even apologize. Just muttered, This is a witch hunt. Arthur stood slowly. Witches hide. I was right in front of you. He gathered the rest of his documents and handed them to the oversight officer. Then he looked directly at Graves. I trained commanders. I advised foreign missions. I risked my life for people I didn't know because I believed in the rules. Graves scoffed. You're obsolete. Arthur stepped closer. No, I'm the proof the system once worked. And that scares you more than anything. Graves looked ready to argue, but no one came to his defense. No one nodded. No one interrupted. Because now it was clear, Arthur wasn't bitter. He wasn't chasing glory. He was there because they crossed a line. And now that line was recorded, printed, filed, unerasable. By the end of the meeting, a formal review of Graves' conduct was initiated. Internal Affairs requested his communications for the last 6 months. Vantage was temporarily suspended pending misuse investigation. Arthur was granted emergency restorative access to all Coldridge systems. Graves left the room last. Head down. No one looked at him. Arthur walked past the broken coffee mug like it wasn't there. Back in the parking lot, snow began to fall. Not heavy, just enough to coat the world in something clean. Arthur stood for a moment, watching it collect on the hood of a parked truck. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just breathed, like a man who finally felt real air again. That night, someone emailed him from a base address he didn't recognize. No subject line, no body text, just an attachment. A video. It was the full gate footage, uncut. Not the one Graves had seen. Not the cropped version that made Arthur look defiant. This one showed everything. From the first interaction, to the moment his knees gave out, to the moment Graves laughed and said, let him earn his rank the hard way. Arthur downloaded it. Didn't send it anywhere. Didn't need to. Truth moves better when it's patient. The following morning, a clerk from the records division stopped him in the hallway. Young, quiet. I was told to delete something last week, she said. From your file. Arthur waited. I didn't, she added. I printed it. It's yours. She handed him an envelope. Inside, a copy of his original field instructor citation, with a handwritten note from a Commander Long, since retired. The note read, Miles is the spine we build around. If they ever forget him, they've lost the war without a shot fired. Arthur folded it carefully, nodded once, walked on. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't cursed. He didn't swing. But in one room, with printed truth and steady breath, he'd collapsed a lie that thought it could wear a uniform. The first shot wasn't loud. It came as a paragraph, buried in a newsletter no one really reads. An internal Coldridge Base bulletin titled Command Climate and Personnel Culture, Preserving Unity. One sentence stood out, carefully placed. Retired personnel must respect operational distance and avoid undermining current leadership through outdated expectations. No names, but it was clear who it was aimed at. Arthur saw it, printed it, added it to the folder. He knew how this worked. When systems can't deny what happened, they blur the motive, shift the language, paint truth as interference. Then came the call, blocked number. He answered anyway. The voice was clipped. Legal. Mr. Miles, we're notifying you that a formal complaint has been filed against your conduct on federal property. You are being investigated for harassment, unauthorized access, and breach of operational security. He didn't respond right away. The voice continued, "You will receive a copy by mail and certified email within 72 hours. Do not attempt to enter Coldridge Base again until this matter is resolved." Click. He waited. Exactly 41 hours later, the envelope arrived. Inside, a 6-page complaint, signed by Graves. It accused Arthur of intimidation of a junior officer, misrepresentation of credentials, infiltrating a secure access system under false pretense, disrupting a classified program evaluation. Every sentence was laced with implication, carefully worded to sound true without needing to be. The document was co-signed by 2 officers Arthur didn't recognize. Attached, a cropped screenshot of him inside the records room, presented as unauthorized activity. No footage, no timestamps, just an image. Arthur stared at it for a long time, then slid it into a new section of his binder. He labeled the tab, "The Spin." He went back to the sources. The officer who led him into records? Transferred. No forwarding contact. The JAG officer from the confrontation? Reassigned pending unrelated review. His VA contact? Stopped responding. His request for a digital transcript of his own service record? Temporarily unavailable due to system maintenance. It was happening. The smear, the isolation, the slow, careful attempt to discredit, not dispute. Arthur wasn't shocked. He was prepared. But preparation doesn't soften the betrayal. Then came the article. It dropped on a mid-tier defense industry blog, written by an anonymous insider. Title: When Legacy Gets in the Way, The Dangers of Outdated Leadership Mindsets in Modern Bases. It painted a portrait of a retired colonel who had inserted himself into current operations, undermined security, and traumatized younger staff with aggressive behavior. The article spread quietly. A few reposts, a few defense circles picked it up. The comments began. "He sounds bitter. Why can't these old-timers just let go? Sounds like a dinosaur with a grudge." Arthur didn't respond, but he read every word, then printed them all, added them to the binder, page after page. He labeled the tab, "Narrative Warfare." He stopped going outside for a few days, not out of fear, out of focus. He started scanning old drives, looking for something he hadn't thought about in years. Training logs, not just his, others, Graves included. He remembered the name from over a decade ago, a trainee whose file had been flagged for aggression toward non-combatants during simulation exercises. It had been dismissed, but Arthur remembered recommending follow-up. He found the memo. He found the original complaint, written by a female instructor. It had been buried under a different heading. Cadet Mentorship Notes, Private. He printed it. The instructor's name had been redacted, but Arthur remembered her face. He opened an old address book, found a number, took a breath, called. Her voice was quiet, surprised. She remembered him. She asked if he was okay. He didn't lie. "I'm not being erased," he said. "I'm being rewritten." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "I still have the original email." "What?" "The one I sent. The one they said never arrived." "You kept it." "I never deleted it. I just never sent it again. They made it clear it wasn't worth it." "Can I see it?" She didn't hesitate. "I'll send it now." Click. 10 minutes later, it arrived. Her name was at the bottom, date stamped. Full context. Graves had verbally harassed 2 instructors, had made remarks about the old guard, had said he couldn't wait until we stopped wasting resources on washed-up heroes and their legacy complexes. Arthur printed it, added it to the binder. He labeled the new tab, History. Then came the knock. Not loud, just firm. Arthur opened the door to find 2 men in suits. One identified himself as a consultant for military records review. The other didn't give a name. They asked if they could speak inside. Arthur said no. They handed him an envelope and left. Inside, a notice of audit. His pension was being reviewed for potential irregularities. No specifics. No warning. Just, "You are under review." He sat down at the table, laid out the binder, opened every tab. One by one, he pulled the pages and arranged them across the table like a map. Spin, narrative, history, suppression. Each piece connected, each name linked. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about what happens when a system defends the people who know how to manipulate it, instead of the ones who built it with integrity. He lit a single lamp, took out a clean sheet of paper. At the top, he wrote, "Collapse timeline," then drew a line down the middle. Left side, what they did. Right side, what they didn't expect. He filled it for an hour. Didn't stop until the page was full. Then he took a photo and emailed it to one person, Catherine Lee. Subject line, "Not done." She replied within 2 hours. One line, then, "Neither am I." The shift didn't start with a whistleblower. It started with a box, not delivered by courier, not sent by legal counsel, dropped off quietly, left at the Coldridge mailroom by a janitor finishing the night shift. No name on the return label, just a strip of masking tape across the top, with 3 words scribbled in thick black ink. For review only. Inside, a manila folder. Inside the folder, printed transcripts, emails, a USB drive, a single post-it note stuck to the last page. It read, "He's telling the truth." The package didn't go to Graves. It went to the civilian oversight officer, the same one who'd watched Arthur without blinking in that confrontation room, the man with the quiet suit and quieter voice. He read through the papers, then played the video files on the USB. There were 3, each one more damning than the last. The first was the uncut gate footage, showing Arthur's restraint, the insults thrown at him, the freezing air visible in each breath. The second was a meeting between Graves and 2 junior officers, discussing how to neutralize the old man's narrative before he gets traction. The third was a voice memo, apparently recorded on accident, where Graves muttered, "If this guy knew how much dirt we've buried under Vantage, he'd burn the building down." Within hours, the oversight officer flagged the materials, marked them sensitive but verifiable, then sent a report to Internal Affairs, then, quietly, confidentially, forwarded a copy to General Catherine Lee. Meanwhile, Arthur didn't know any of this had happened. He spent the morning at the DMV, trying to renew a government ID that had mysteriously gone invalid. The clerk behind the glass tapped for a while, then frowned. "You got a federal flag on your file." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "What kind of flag?" "Just says hold for manual review. That's all it tells me." He nodded, took the receipt, left, back home. He found a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, a printed photo, grainy, like it had been screen captured. It was from 2013. Arthur, standing in a conference room with a whiteboard behind him. The board was filled with flowcharts, color-coded boxes, arrows connecting each element of a base-wide behavioral detection algorithm. At the bottom, a caption. Original framework, A. Miles, 2013. Someone had gone back, found the source code, found the proof, and now it was resurfacing. That evening, Catherine called. Not a text, not an email, a call. Her voice was low, sharp, controlled. "You were right." Arthur said nothing. "You weren't flagged by error. Vantage wasn't just tracking disruptions. It was training soldiers to pre-label resistance as disloyalty. You knew. Not like this." There was a pause. "I sent the oversight officer everything I had." Arthur waited. "I think it's about to break," she said. "Good." "No, not good," she added. "It's going to get ugly. Graves is friends. He's already trying to leak a counter-narrative. I've seen it." "Then you know what's coming." Arthur exhaled. "Let it." 2 days later, a military forum received a tip. Anonymous, an account with zero history, posted a thread. How Coldridge Base buried its own protocols to push an illegal surveillance program. It got 10 upvotes, then 20. Then a moderator flagged it, but not before someone downloaded the files, then shared them, then reposted them. By the end of the day, it hit Reddit, then Twitter, then a Substack by a former military analyst. Arthur's name wasn't in the first wave, but the Miles protocol was, and people started asking, who wrote it? Why was it buried? Why did a retired officer have to walk back into his own building to prove it still existed? Someone pulled up his field record. Someone else found the gate video, the full one, not the cropped version. And then it happened. A child, 11 years old, uploaded a video. It was her and her grandfather. She said, "This is my grandpa. He was in the army for 30 years. They made him do push-ups in the snow because he wore the wrong coat. I hope they say sorry. The video hit 200,000 views in 24 hours. By the next morning, #Miles Protocol was trending. Graves hit back fast. An internal memo went out to all Coldridge staff. Be advised, ongoing disinformation campaigns may attempt to discredit the current command structure. Do not engage. Refer all inquiries to public affairs. But it was too late, because someone, maybe that janitor, maybe a clerk, maybe a ghost from Arthur's past, had leaked the full Graves communications archive. And there it was. Every slur, every private insult, every joke made at the expense of deadweight veterans. One message read, "The old man thinks rules protect him. He doesn't realize we are the rules now." Another, "Erase his clearance. Erase the man." It was over. Not publicly. Not yet. But structurally, the dam had cracked. Arthur sat at his table. The binder lay open thicker now. Pages flagged. Tabs color-coded. He added a new tab. One word on it. Turn. His phone buzzed. It was the oversight officer. "I can't speak officially," he said, "but your record has been restored." Arthur didn't answer. "Also, your pension review has been canceled. Permanently." Still, Arthur said nothing. The voice softened. "There's going to be hearings. Testimony. He'll be asked to speak." Arthur finally replied. "No. Pause. We could use your voice, sir." "I've already given it," Arthur said. "Now it's your turn." Click. That night it snowed again. Soft. Heavy. Clean. Arthur stood outside for a while. Let it fall. Didn't move. Didn't smile. Just stood. The last statue of a system that tried to forget its own architects. But statues don't forget. They wait. It began quietly. A headline, tucked in the corner of a defense news site. Internal review launched at Coldridge Base over misuse of veteran data system. No names. No scandal. Just the signal. Something had cracked. The next day, the signal turned into a shockwave. A national paper ran the headline large. The colonel they erased helped design the system that caught them. Front page. Bold font. Arthur Miles' name printed where the world could see it. Not as a ghost, but as the architect of the software Coldridge Base had abused, and the man it had tried to erase. Inside, an expose. Details about the Miles protocol. Screenshots of the falsified denial codes. Direct quotes from Graves' leaked messages. A timeline of suppression, erasure, and retaliation. Accompanying photo. Arthur in uniform. Not recent. Not defiant. Just real. Taken at a training seminar 15 years ago, sleeves rolled. Hands chalk dusted from a whiteboard. Focused. Sharp. Alive. The caption. Colonel Arthur Miles didn't want to be a hero. He wanted to be heard. That morning, Graves resigned. Not in person. Not with a statement. Through a one-line email to Command HR. Effective immediately, I withdraw from all leadership roles. Within 72 hours, 2 Coldridge staffers were placed on administrative leave. Vantage was formally suspended across 5 bases. An inquiry was opened into the unauthorized use of behavioral surveillance on former military personnel. The system didn't collapse all at once. It didn't need to. It simply began to fold under the weight of its own audit trail. Because Arthur had never brought fire. He brought paper. And paper leaves ink that never fades. By the end of the week, 3 congressional offices had requested Arthur's testimony. He declined all 3, not out of bitterness, out of choice. He wasn't looking for a spotlight. He was looking for what came next. At Coldridge, the culture shifted. No public apologies. No dramatic pressers. Just new posters in the hallway. Legacy is not liability. Training updates that reference the Miles protocol by name. A formal note entered into every service record from 2010 to 2015. Instructor, Colonel Arthur Miles read. Verified contributor to instructional infrastructure. A small thing, but permanent. And permanence was what Arthur had fought for. Not revenge, not headlines, just memory that couldn't be deleted. Graves didn't disappear, though. He tried one last trick. A podcast interview. He painted himself as misunderstood. Caught in a generational conflict, he called it. I respected Colonel Miles, he said. But times change. He couldn't accept that. He clung to outdated authority. Arthur didn't respond. Others did. Former cadets, junior officers, even a few civilians who'd worked logistics during his tenure. They flooded the comment sections, not with outrage, with receipts, scans of his lectures, quotes from trainings, stories about how he stopped young soldiers from burning out or breaking, memos he wrote to shield others from abuse. One reply said, "He didn't cling to power. He kept the weight off our backs when leadership let it fall." Another, "He didn't bury him. You exposed yourself." By week's end, Graves deleted his social accounts. No one chased him. The silence was louder than any protest. Because silence, when earned, is power. Arthur returned to his routine. He still woke at 5, still drank his coffee black, still walked to the corner store every Thursday, rain or snow. The world didn't suddenly treat him better, but it no longer treated him like he didn't exist. That, to Arthur, was enough. One morning, a letter arrived, handwritten. It had no return address, just a name in the corner. Private First Class R. Mendoza. Inside, "Sir, I was one of the soldiers who stood by that day, at the gate. I didn't speak. I didn't stop it. I told myself I was just following orders. I've thought about it every day since. This week, I submitted a report to IA. I told them everything I saw. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just telling you, I finally stepped forward. Because of you." Arthur folded the letter, placed it inside the back of the binder. No tab, just space. Then came a hearing, not in a courtroom, in a sealed Pentagon chamber. Arthur was not asked to attend, but his name was read aloud. A major, shaking slightly, opened with a statement. "We're here because the procedures we ignored belonged to the man who designed them." That sentence alone reshaped 3 policies, reinstated the oversight clause on surveillance programs, forced quarterly audits of base-level clearance revisions, created a new whistleblower tier for retired contributors. It was called the Miles Provision. But Arthur didn't stand at podium, didn't testify on live TV. He was at home, wiping down his table, refolding a coat. He watched the hearing later on a government site. No commentary, no chat feed, just the record. And sometimes the record is enough. The binder remained on the shelf. He added one last tab, consequence. Behind it, he placed a single sheet of paper, the one with his reinstated status, dated, signed, and entered into permanent base record. At the bottom, status, active in history, do not remove. He closed the binder, wrapped it in cloth, slid it into the drawer, not hidden, just no longer needed. Outside, the snow had started again. This time not cold, just clean, just light enough to remind the world. It keeps moving. But Arthur? Arthur had finally stopped running, and the system that tried to forget him now had his name carved into its spine. Not as a martyr, not as a hero, but as proof that erasure can fail if you don't flinch, and if you keep every receipt. Arthur didn't expect visitors. He hadn't had one in weeks, maybe longer. The kind of solitude he kept wasn't about distance. It was about precision. Quiet gave him space to think, and thinking was still how he survived. So when the knock came, 2 short raps, then 1 longer. He waited a full 10 seconds before opening the door. It was her, Maya, the clerk from records, 20-something, nervous hands, eyes that didn't quite meet yours unless she meant it. She held a folder, slim, neat, the kind people bring when they aren't sure what they're here to say. "Sir," she started. Come in." She did. Sat across from him without taking off her coat. The air between them felt like it had weight. Arthur waited. Finally, she said it. "I knew what they were doing. Not all of it, but enough." He didn't nod, didn't soften. She opened the folder. Inside, a printed memo. It was the original incident report from the day at the gate. But this version had a note at the bottom, a handwritten one from her supervisor. If he pushes, stall. If he files, slow down. Keep him off system visibility. Don't escalate unless he escalates. Arthur studied the handwriting. "I found it in a shared draft box," she said. "It was going to be deleted. I downloaded it the day after the second leak. Why bring it now? Because I didn't speak up then. There it was, Not an excuse. A reckoning. Arthur leaned back in his chair, stared at her. She met his gaze this time. "I'm not here to ask forgiveness," she said, "just to stop hiding behind silence." Arthur looked at the memo again, folded it neatly, placed it on the table. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. Maya stood to leave, but before she reached the door, he said, "You still work there?" She hesitated. "For now, if they come for you. I've already backed everything up." She left without another word. Sometimes dignity isn't loud. It's just a door closing gently behind you. The second reckoning came by email. A name Arthur hadn't seen in years. Captain Decker. He'd been in Arthur's 2005 unit. Ambitious. Tactical. The kind of officer who smiled in public and sharpened knives in private. Arthur opened the message. It was short. "I saw the articles. I wasn't surprised. I thought you should know. Graves used to quote you during our early rotations. He said you were the kind of leader that scared people into being better. Guess he couldn't handle being measured by the same standard. Asterisk, he became everything you warned us about. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I do now. Asterisk." Arthur didn't reply, but he read it twice, then 3 times, then archived it. Not out of dismissal, out of finality. Some things you keep, others you close. The third came unexpectedly. Not a letter, not a file, a visit. It was raining this time. Not snow, just a steady gray wash across the concrete. Arthur opened the door to find Catherine Lee standing on his porch. Not in uniform, in a raincoat, casual boots, hair tied back. "I was nearby," she said. "No, you weren't." She smirked. He let her in. They sat at the kitchen table. The same one where he'd written his collapsed timeline. The same one where he'd unfolded every piece of proof like it might one day disappear. She didn't touch the binder, didn't mention the hearings. Instead, she said, "I want to name the new training annex after you." Arthur blinked. "No, it's not a favor. It's a correction. It's a billboard." She didn't argue, just nodded slowly. "You still think this was about you and Graves?" she said. Arthur didn't reply. She leaned forward. "It wasn't. It was about what you represent. The idea that quiet people with rules still matter in rooms that only reward loud men with leverage." He looked at her. "I don't want my name on a wall." "Then what do you want?" He paused. Thought. Policy. 3 weeks later, it happened. Not a headline. Not a parade. A footnote. Buried at the end of a press release from the Department of Defense. Asterisk effective immediately. The Instructional Integrity Act will include the Miles Clause. No instructional contributor, active or retired, shall have their clearance revoked without formal notice, traceable cause, and third-party oversight. Asterisk. That was enough. One afternoon, Arthur visited a cemetery outside the city. The ground was damp, the air still. He walked alone, carrying nothing. No flowers, no medals, just memory. He stopped at a stone marked Lieutenant Jerome Kellier, 1971 to 2004, who followed orders even when silence would have been easier. Arthur stood for a long time. Kellier had been his second in command, the first to say, "You can't save the system from itself." He had been right, then wrong, then right again. Arthur touched the top of the stone, said nothing, and walked away. Back home, he sat by the window. Same chair, same mug. He opened a notebook. Blank pages. Not for documentation this time. Not for record keeping. Just space. He wrote 1 sentence. "If they erase you loud enough, the world starts to listen." He closed the notebook, filed it next to the binder. Both were done now. That night, he got one last email. No sender name, just a subject line. "Thank you." Attached was a photo. A new recruit, holding a field manual, smiling, and on the cover, Field Readiness Protocol, Revised Edition, the Miles Framework. Arthur didn't smile. He just leaned back in his chair, let the silence fill the room. A silence he had earned, not with revenge, but with record. The day was ordinary. No cameras, no podiums, just a sky somewhere between winter and spring, the kind that holds light without warmth. Arthur Miles walked the edge of Coldridge Base one last time. Not inside, not through the gate. He didn't need permission anymore. The place had already changed. Not dramatically. Systems never fall that way. But the edges were different. Straighter. More careful. Less smug. That was enough. He carried nothing with him. No folder. No notes. No coat with medals pinned discreetly inside. Just his hands. Weathered. Empty. At peace. Along the perimeter fence, he stopped at a concrete bench. There was a plaque mounted to the wall above it. To the silent who saw everything. AM. No rank. No dates. Just initials. The kind you carve when you want something to be noticed without being celebrated. He sat, watched a group of new recruits doing drills in the distance. Their voices low, focused. No one shouting for dominance. No one performing strength. Just process. He smiled, not because it was perfect, but because it was different. From his pocket, he took out a folded envelope. Inside, the last copy of the gate incident memo, annotated, corrected, time-stamped. He'd carried it longer than he'd needed to. Now, he laid it on the bench beside him. The wind picked it up slightly, tugged at it. He didn't stop it. Let the page lift, let the past breathe, then placed a small stone on top, not to trap it, just to remind the world. This happened. Later that afternoon, he visited the library near his home. He didn't go for books. He went for the filing room, a quiet corner with a self-service scanner. He placed a single page under the glass. The first page of his original protocol. The one they thought they'd overwritten. Scanned, saved, uploaded, labeled Miles Protocol Source Archive. He added a note. Asterisk, don't make this about me. Make it impossible to do this to anyone else. Asterisk. That evening, he walked past the old training annex. They were rebuilding it, repurposing the space into a hybrid classroom and simulation lab. On the fencing, a banner read, Coming Fall 2025, the Miles Instructional Center. He didn't stop, just walked by. A child on a bicycle passed him and looked up at the sign, then looked at Arthur. Were you him? The boy asked. Arthur paused. Sometimes, he said. The boy nodded like that made sense, then wrote on. At home, Arthur stood in front of the mirror, not to check his reflection, to unpin something. He removed a small patch from the inside of his jacket. Frayed, faded. So well done. The original insignia. He placed it in a wooden box beside his bed, closed the lid. He didn't turn on the news, didn't follow the final reports. But the world kept moving, and it remembered that he existed, that he had warned them, that he had been erased, and came back with proof. He became shorthand in certain circles. Don't pull a Graves, or Miles will rise from the paper. It was half a joke, but also a reminder. Records matter. One morning, a law student sent him a letter. She'd been researching systemic gatekeeping in military institutions. She wrote, I didn't know how much damage silence could do until I read what they did to you. I also didn't know how much good it could hold until I saw how you used it. He didn't reply. He printed the letter, filed it behind his old retirement papers. Not for ego, for context. At night, the world got quieter. Arthur's walks got shorter, his legs more tired, but his eyes sharp as ever. He saw everything. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to write it down. Not because it didn't matter, because it was no longer in danger of being lost. Then one final visit to the Archive Center in D.C. Unannounced, he handed over a box. Inside the binder, every tab, every receipt, every document that saved his name. The clerk looked confused. You're donating this? No, Arthur said. I'm releasing it. To who? Arthur thought for a moment. To the next one, he said. He left the building without turning back. That night, the moon was clean and bright. Arthur stood at his window, not thinking, not remembering, just present, the way people often forget to be. He turned off the light, closed the notebook, shut the drawer. Not forever, just for now, because some endings aren't closures. They're clearings, so others can walk through unblocked, seen, remembered, respected. They tried to erase him, but what he built didn't need their permission to last.